welcome to Season 6 of How I Made It Through. As I've said before, it is often through pain and suffering that we learn our most profound lessons. It is through courageously exploring the inner landscape of our lives and seeking healing that we transform. Joining me this season is my newest co-host, Bernadette Thompson. Bernadette and I invite you to join us now twice a week as we continue to explore the extraordinary stories of those who've had near-death and spiritually transformative experiences, or are simply wise and old souls sent here to help the collective awaken and heal. Our show reminds us that death of the body does not mean death of the soul, and that indeed we do transition into the wonder of the afterlife and come back again and again and again. Our hope is that each episode will serve as inspiration for your own spiritual discovery. We thank you for joining us in this powerful learning and ask that you subscribe, comment, like, and share. Together, we can spread the growing awareness that we are all infinite souls sent to Earth School at this very unique and miraculous time in human evolution. Today, we are so lucky to welcome our guest, Bev Martin, who is a soul-guided, brain-based clarity finder. Welcome so much, Bev.
Thank you so much, Kristin and Bernadette. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Let me go ahead and read the bio so that people have some context for who you are, and then we'll just start asking lots of questions to get a sense of more truly who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Bev Martin is a pioneering expert in helping people harness both intuitive and strategic decision making. Her brain based and soul guided approach helps individuals unlock the power of their intuitive intelligence to find solutions, make impactful decisions, and achieve success. Her approach has been included in renowned training programs like Shelby Lee's Creating Safer Spaces and highlighted in award winning podcasts, including the Autoimmune Hour with Sharon Saylor. Bev brings her love for words, humor, and storytelling into her work and life, blending heartfelt wisdom with practical guidance. She loves to help women reconnect with their inner knowledge and lead fulfilling, soul-centered lives. Beautifully said. I love to start with the beginning. Everyone has a story, and stories are how we learn. Well, does it make sense to even go back to your childhood? When did you start to recognize who you are as an eternal being in this worldly existence?
I love your question. I would say the realization came in my 20s, but I had to make sense of experiences that came in my youth. So about age 7 was the first time I saw a person who had left their body, and I didn't know what was happening. I was in South Africa. My grandmother was sleeping in my room, in my bed. I was sleeping on cushions on the floor because my grandfather had had a very serious stroke the week before, and he was in the hospital nearby. So we were visiting him in the hospital, and, all of us were quite stressed. I was just 7. And I'm sleeping on the floor in my room, and Grandpa walks in. And the room gets light and bright and so full of love. And I'm thinking, wow, you're better. This is great. And he walked over to my grandmother and kissed her on the cheek. And then he was gone. And I was like, wahoo, I can't wait to let everybody know that he's better. And then the hospital called to say that he had passed. And it was so confusing as a child to go, I saw him more at ease, more at peace, more himself than ever I'd seen him, like so much to celebrate. And now we're crying. I can't understand. And also my mom and family members also, when I was like, but I saw him, they would, shh. That was the beginning of like, which is true? Is the world I see with my physical eyes that everyone else agrees with, is that real? Or is what I feel and see with these other inner eyes, is that real? So that was the question that really only in my 20s became truly answered for me.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I often do is just taking people back to see their childhood. That's an amazing story. That's an amazing
And in many
gift.
ways, and so fortunate to, when I tell my now adult daughter that I grew up in a country that had no television. There was no television in the country until I was a much, older teenager.
Wow.
And I say how fortunate I was, because the imagination and the creativity were all quite pretty pure. We were really capable of putting things together or considering things without that television. When I tell my daughter, she thinks I was, deprived terribly.
Of course.
But I've since read books, funnily enough, on creativity and intuition. And one of them, I looked at the back, and it's a fellow South African who of a similar age is like, yeah, he also would have grown up at a time without television. And I think that expansion was really a benefit. But it was also difficult to not, for a long time, have anyone to explain to me what was happening,
I bet.
you know.
I bet. And so it wasn't, you're saying, until your 20s that
Yes,
can you say more about that?
I was so lucky. So I'm in my 20s, a young marriage, all the things, doing all the human things like let's be successful in the world, let's fit in, all the things that the human self is concerned with. And I had been, as my intention had been to turn off that other thing, whatever that was, because it was so inconvenient to have so many levels of information. And this is also, I grew up in apartheid South Africa, so heavy energy. I'm open to all of it going, I can't find a way to understand. I was at the, even as a teenager, at the library going like, where are the books about life? Where are the instructions? Because it seemed so conflicted and so difficult to make sense of it in a simple way. So in my 20s, so fortunate, my aunt, and she was the only person in the family who kind of looked at me like, there might be something going on here that you need support with.
Mm.
She took me to a spiritualist church, and there was a medium on the platform demonstrating mediumship.
Mhm.
And I think I sat there with my mouth hanging open going, oh, it's a thing. And the environment, it was a home that was turned into a spiritualist church. So there was stuff on the walls that gave me comfort to go, okay, it's spiritual, it's in the light of the divine, because I'd been told other than that too. And so I was like, oh, it can be in the light of the divine, and it's a thing, and there's a purpose for it. So that helped tremendously. And then I began to study with mediums, other mediums, and find a way to go, okay, how does this make sense in a life? And since one cannot turn it off, because I had tried,
Mm.
how do I use this purposefully and positively? So that was the beginning of my real education.
Yeah.
Mm.
'Cause my assumption was that you had turned it off, but it was still very active. You just didn't
Didn't go
talk
away.
about it. It didn't know how to
Right.
compartmentalize it or have a
It was
relationship to it.
right. I feel like privately, even though I didn't know to say, oh, these are my guides, I had also in my young years an invisible friend that was a cause of great amusement to people around me. And without her, I don't think I would have made it through.
Mm.
Mhm.
That I had someone, and people would say, oh, you've got such a great imagination. I'd be like, okay, let's call it that.
Yes.
That's fine with me.
Mm.
But, having spirit's companionship
Mhm.
throughout, and then in my 20s, finding actual people's companionship, people who were credible, who had studied, who were devoted spiritually, that had their feet on the ground. It was enormously helpful to me. And so I see that as the beginning of bringing these parts together.
Mm. I have two things that are coming up for me. One is the fact that you were in South Africa, so you were in Africa, and that Africa, it is like the Native American. Um, there is a beautiful spiritual energy that is connected from the earth that has, and so the fact that that your opening happened there, it doesn't, it's just that you can just feel it.
Right.
You can just feel it. And the other, which I think is fascinating, because when is the Spiritualist Church. As I was going through the passing of my husband, and I was starting to open up spiritually, and my ancestors came to me, I had this, and I often call it's an itch you can't scratch, that I just,
Mhm.
this longing for more. And I found myself in a spiritualist community. It was online, but and so it was the first place that I went, that it was like, there are people here I can commune with
Right.
without having to explain, or make excuses for what I
Yes.
was seeing and feeling and sensing.
And such a liberation to find that sort of place. It tickled me, I had been, and I have a fondness for established places where people go to worship spirit, whatever flavor it is. I think we can meet there. But
Mhm.
I loved that here was a very homey church with beautiful pictures in the front, an organ with music. We would have tea afterwards, and nobody said, "We missed you last week." There
I
was
love that.
there was no pressure or compulsion, and I found myself just, making it a regular part of my life without any pressure.
So I hear the community, the safe community was there, and you said you started to learn. You'd
Yeah.
had all these experiences. How did what you learned help you deepen your understanding, consolidate your understanding, focus your understanding?
Mm. Several avenues. I was so very fortunate that the spiritualist church that I found had as its adjunct side by side. So there was a brother and a sister. The brother was the Swami at the yoga school, and the sister was the medium. And so there was another place where things came together that in the world might look like they would be apart. So I got to become immersed in the Vedantic studies and meditation in the yoga school, and then the spiritualist church. And because they were connected, it was seamless to make those two things go together. So some of the discipline of studying, ancient texts, and then some of the support of realizing, okay, so this thing that you say is a gift, which up until now has been kind of a curse. What do I do with that? And then I would say the umbrella over all of it was the understanding
I'm so
of,
sorry.
oh, you're right.
Just
You're okay.
sorry. Uh,
Um, I would say the umbrella over all of it was the understanding from learning about the Hindu philosophy was that this is not our one life,
Mhm.
that there are other lives. That helped me greatly as I looked around the country in which I was born to go, how can this be? Inequity between people and cruelty, and like I
Mhm.
don't understand. So that was the beginning of going, okay, um, and so the metaphor that we all know, that okay, this is a school, we come to learn, we come to grow. So those where I had been looking for the books on what is all this? How does this work? That began greatly to assist. And then we would sit in regular mediumship circles every Monday night for years,
mm.
which was the most wonderful education, is to understand the different frequencies and energies. Some actual, live presentation when somebody would come in and change one's voice, where there was a place to go. Okay, what is this in service of what? A lot to do with, like, how are we sure that we are in absolute service of something greater and light? What's the dark side, and is there one? All of those sorts of questions, which are essential.
Well,
Mhm.
I'd love for you to answer some of those.
Well, sure. So
Yes.
I would say there had been there had been other contexts in which people talked about, you know, the devil or whatever, and it's like, huh, I don't know that guy. I just don't. And in terms of discernment, in the spiritualist philosophy, that understanding of like what is clear and pure and honest. And I had an experience of this, talking about stories. So learning a lot about frequency and vibration, which, in the world we live in now, we can certainly cop to. There's a heaviness.
Mm-hmm.
And so my sense is our work is to remain as lifted and as light as we can. And that's not to say, oh, la, 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 Pollyanna. It's to say, what is the work that needs to be done in order to remain at a frequency that is tuned in to that which is truly helpful, rather than accidentally falling into the hole where our empathy might take us, into that weight and that density. So that is the assignment. But before I knew it really well, and so as an empathic person, many people are, we're connected, we're not separate. One example of empathy is I would walk into the lobby of a hospital and faint, because it was as if I was so open to, what's happening here, that my little body was like, whoop, no can do.
Wow.
So realizing like, oh, to have a deep sense of feeling can be useful when you know when and why.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's almost like having a very keen sense of smell. If you're walking through a field of lavender, how lovely.
Mm-hmm.
But do you want to have that keen sense of smell, at the garbage dump? Probably not. So where is this useful? How and why? So back in the day, I'm still learning about this frequency and vibration. I was doing my next level of training in neurolinguistic programming, and the cheapest accommodation they could find, it was a 2-week intensive, cheapest place that they could find where we could all be residential and have our meals and everything, was an alcohol rehab lab. When we had one wing of the building, and we could go to the classroom and we could all have our dorms, and I began to crave alcohol. But like no one has ever craved it before, certainly not me. I like my little glass of wine once in a while. This was not that. It was overwhelming. And even to the point that I was thinking, okay, how can I smuggle stuff in? Like not me. And fortunately, it didn't take too long for me to go, wait, this is not me. But here we are, the walls are full of craving. We're sleeping in beds of people who were doing their best to overcome an addiction, but it's there. So I have so much sympathy for people trying to overcome it. It's like, go somewhere where there's so much more support for it, rather than that's an example of going to where the heaviness was and not the lightness. And so I went outside, I walked, I prayed, I lifted, and was like, help me. Whew. And so I offer that as an example of how empathy is so necessary and so useful. But we want to say, what am I plugging into? Am I plugging into the pain or the source? And surely we can be more helpful when we're plugged into the right thing. But that taught me a great deal about vibration and frequency.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really beautifully explained.
I know. We both want to. It's so that was wonderful. It's the whole connection. I think it's so important in what you're teaching us here right now about the frequency and about the energy, because it really is. And as an empath, we can go into a room and feel
Exactly.
that person that we don't want to be near. Because they're, and that we should, teaching ourselves, as you said, that we want to keep our nose open in the field of lavender, but when that energy comes in and it's not positive, that we begin to understand that. And I think for even the person that isn't open spiritually or doesn't think they have gifts, that you've just given them a window of what it truly is for all of us to have. Thank you.
And to know, like one of the side effects of being open empathically is I don't buy secondhand clothes, and I would love to. But sometimes it's like, oh, the history of things, we feel
Mhm.
it. Can it be cleared? Of course it can. But that's part of our work, is like bringing our energy, our frequency, the work that it takes to have it, and have it impact outwards rather than soaking up. And
Mm.
one of the challenges, any of us who've had loss, is it's very hard to keep one's frequency up when we're grieving, and we can't
Yes.
expect that of ourselves 100% of the way. But I think of that with mediumship, that one of the gifts of going to a medium is that the medium's job is to keep their vibration up so that they can be open to that
Mhm.
which we're connecting with. However, the person who's coming for that has a great advantage over the medium, which is love.
Mm.
Love that they have with the person they're seeking. So together, it's like the client brings the love, and the medium's job is to keep themselves attuned so that they can listen up and listen in. And so I think that makes for a really wonderful combination. But I really want people to know, who think they're not mediums, that your love for your person is far more important and really can make the connection. And I wonder sometimes, most cultures will say, there's a year, give yourself a year for like the real heart of the grieving. I think it's individual for each person, but I wonder if it is that after a year, where the weight of the grieving has adjusted itself so that we can also be uplifted. We must surely have had moments of uplift
Mm.
that make it much easier for our person to reach us.
Mhm.
Yes. I love that statement, make it much easier for our person to reach us. What is one practical way? Let's say someone is an empath and they want to connect. Are the tools, advice about elevating to a frequency where they are amenable to being reached?
It's a great way to ask that. Yes. So one is openness and lightness. So embracing lightness. I'm playing. I've got on repeat the song from Wicked, "Defying Gravity." It's just like, play it again, because that's really it. We're raising ourselves to the place of, the lightness of our spirit,
Mhm.
even in the density of the world in which we live. So that's the work, and each person can find for themselves, like, what lifts me. Is it a walk in nature? Is it, for me, at my breakfast table is the hummingbirds right at the feeder. It's just like, oh,
Mm.
I've named them. Uh, there's no way to
Mhm.
be sure that each name is each bird, but, indulge me.
Of
Um,
course.
so nature, light, music,
Music.
humor.
Yeah.
You've probably found, Bernadette, that spirit is hilarious.
Oh, they tease me more than I can tell you.
They're so funny, and it's such a quality of humor. Unlike in the world where there usually is often a person who's the butt of a joke, humor, spirit humor is just so funny. So when we can consider what lifts me, how do I maintain my frequency and my vibration? We can become more conscious about that. And so I would say, energetic hygiene uh,
Mhm.
is really important there. The other piece is intention. So, like for me, walking into a hospital, perhaps unconsciously, my intention was, oh, I feel sorry for all these people. Boof, my body was just like, you can't hold all that sorrow,
Right.
and that's not your job, and it's actually not helping anyone.
Yeah.
So to have an intention, and one that I've developed, and I've heard others use now, I'm like, oh, that's good. Spirit delivered this. My intention, if I go, say, into a hospital or into an area where I'm certain that there will be a weightiness for whatever reason, it's a memorial service, there's been grief or sorrow, something's happening, the world at large, even.
Mhm.
It's my intention is, help me to observe, but not absorb.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right? I
Yes.
can see with my eyes where there's a need for compassion or care or kindness. I can see that. Show me that. But don't give me the brunt of the whole experience, because it's hard to come back from. So an intention, a prayer like that can be really helpful, as well as living with intention everywhere. If you're going to visit someone, to say, my intention is to lift them, if that's what's needed, or my intention is this kind of exchange, or to come out in unscathed, whatever it might be. But in working with our intuition, having intention in each moment is very helpful. It keeps us on track with what it is that we're wanting to have happen.
Mm. I know that Bernadette has one guide that is with her. Do you
Mhm.
have one guide or a team of guides? What is your relationship like with your
I
guide
have a
or
team.
guides?
I have a team. And I actually have some portraits of two of my guides. I have a team, and
Mhm.
then when I connect with a client, I see their team.
Whoa.
So my guides and their guides, they all have a little chat sometimes before we get on, because I just sit for a minute before we get on, and I can feel like, oh, big conversation. And then I'm pointing over there because I'm working here on Zoom, and my client is sitting where you are. I see their guides behind them.
Mhm.
And oftentimes their guides will often use metaphor, because it's just such an efficient way of communicating. But I
Mhm.
will often see, like, how are the guides entering even tells us something. Are they gathering like, everyone just came like an emergency summit meeting? That tells me something. They amble over, So my own guides help me to understand what those guides want me to know and understand. So it's
Mhm.
quite a team effort.
Wow.
And yeah, I love my guides.
Yeah.
Of course. So I gotta ask, I mean, I know some guides are angels, some guides are people who've lived many lives, some guides are extraterrestrial. So I want to know what you see. And are they like as solid as someone like we are to each other right now? Or are they translucent?
They're a little lighter, more airy than than those of us like this. And my guides are spiritual teachers who I have not known in my life. I have connection with my ancestors, but my guides I haven't known. I've also noticed at various times in my life when there's been a change of the guard,
Mm.
when it's been like, okay, you've still got your familiars, but you need more insight about this, or we're going to kick you in the rear a little bit more about that. And so, like, expert guides will come in to assist as we're navigating something in particular.
Mhm.
And often, like, this feeling of male and female energy, even though one might look male or female, the energies can mix.
Yes.
um,
Mhm.
and often in dreams, they'll come to me in dreams as well. Occasionally, like some years ago, I kept getting a theme, and noticing that, I would say to a client, is this going on for you? And they'd be like, no. And then realizing, like, oh, my guides are trying to, like, I was shutting down my client session and going, well, there you go. And I hadn't done enough of just listening for myself, so that my guides are having to sneak in messages into my client
Wow.
session, which is not okay for my
Fascinating.
clients. But
Fascinating.
yeah, they talk to me. Often it will be like a little dialogue or conversation. And then in a client session, I think of it as like channeling their guides in a personal way. It's like, the guides say, and we'll hear things like a turn of phrase or things that I might not normally use, but the person does.
Mm.
So their guides bring that. It makes it so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's exactly how it's like a channeling through.
Right.
I'm saying things in my voice and in my, and then having to let them know these are coming through me. These words
Right.
are coming through me. That this is not. Yeah, it's an experience.
And you probably know Bernadette, like the difference when Bernadette is speaking and when you're
Yes.
speaking on behalf of, and that takes some time to
Yeah.
discern, but then it's great.
Well, and as Kristin was saying, I have a one guide who's my main, and they help me bring in, they help me bring in
Yes.
the others. But and sometimes I have to make that with the client, saying when is my guide speaking? When are their ancestors or their loved ones speaking? And then
Yes.
it's me kind of putting a little color onto what I
Right.
do.
Because
whatever
of
they.
course it's both.
Yeah.
I think there was a time, maybe, and I'm making up a time frame, I'm thinking maybe early 90s. There was a time when channels, like the gift of a channel was to move themselves entirely out of the way. But
Mhm,
I feel like spirit requires us to be ourselves. We're
mhm,
not an empty vessel.
Yeah.
We're not a neutral, channel. We are part of it. So that's when the guides will use a reference from your own life that'll prompt.
mhm,
I studied tarot many years ago. And even now, when I don't necessarily even need to pull the cards out, my guides will show me one as a shorthand. Be like, oh,
mhm,
right. Oh, you Two of Swords. Okay. So it's almost like, our guides will use a reference point that they know makes sense to us
mhm,
in that way. That, in speaking to people who are longing to connect with a loved one of the challenges is when you know the person. So you've got the love there, but maybe you need the skill of a medium.
Right.
I found that it was a challenge when I am a medium and was connecting with my father-in-law when he passed,
mhm,
because I kept thinking like, well, it's so clean when it's with a client,
mhm,
because I know where the client begins and ends, and I know what's my story and what's theirs.
Right.
Now, so my father-in-law had passed, and my husband and I were driving down to the beach to let his mom know that we'd heard, and to let her know. And while we're driving down to the beach, I'm saying, okay, Dad, if there's anything you want to tell us. But of course, I'm grieving the loss of this person as well. So there's that place of grieving and being a medium and wanting to reconcile the two. And um, he showed me what it was the first thing he showed me. And I saw that and I thought, well, I don't know if I should tell my husband, this is what your dad is showing. I think I'll wait. And I think there was a part of me that was waiting for it to be like absolute certain, da-da. Anyway, I hadn't said anything. And he showed me a yellow legal pad, like we write on, with like notes on that. I couldn't see the writing, but I could see the legal pad, and was something he always used to make notes on. So later in the day, as I'm moving around, I see the legal pad again, but now it's got a red underline. So I'm like, oh, I think I'm really supposed to say something. So to my mother-in-law and to my husband, I said, Dad's showing me this yellow legal pad and he's underlining it in red. And the words that I could read were, I'm okay, which is just like him. Minimalist, to the point, right? And that's how we know each person comes through. They show us the
mhm,
essence of who they are. And this is like
Right.
Dad's going, I'm okay, right? Just like he would
Yeah.
speak.
yeah,
And then my husband, about 2 days later, went into the little greenhouse where my father-in-law had been potting little seedlings just before spring. And there's a yellow legal pad with his notes of what was potted here and there. And the red underline was one of those carpenter's pencils.
Mm.
And so when my husband came on and went like, oh, that was
Yeah.
his way of knowing, oh, okay, that's
Yes.
bad, right?
Confirmation.
Confirmation, because that's in many ways the thing we want.
mhm,
Exactly.
Is like, could it be? And with a client, when the client says, you did not know my person and you knew this, is confirmation. When you're working with someone and you did know the person, I'm like, how do I know? I didn't just make that up. And Spirit says, get out of the way, we'll do the
yeah, exactly.
work.
Well, I was just we're talking about this other client, but I don't swear. It's just part of me. I don't swear. And there were two references, about swearing. And I just kind of said what it was, not realizing at this moment, I'm not realizing, I'm like, you can't say that, because that's just
Right,
me. And I finally did. And they were like, that's exactly what they would
that's
have
it.
said, you know.
Exactly.
Wow.
And
But
so, so
But
I
here
love
I'm trying to be, Bernadette who doesn't swear,
right. And that's being the medium for something when like, okay, this isn't my way, but this is how this person is being evidential to the people. And
right.
so often
And
it's something so strange.
Mhm,
yeah, I've shared this on the show a couple of times, but my father died in 2020 and I was spending some time connecting with him. And I certainly don't define as a medium, but as all of our guests have said, and that you are validating, is that we all have the ability to connect. And I'm lying in bed, which is usually when I do it before I fall asleep. And I heard a term that I'd never heard in my life, which was, and my father was very intellectual, loved physics and metaphysics. And he said to me, wave particle theory.
I just got the
Wave
goosies.
particle theory. So, of course, I had to look it up, and I don't remember the definition offhand, but it really directly linked to spiritual concepts and validity for spiritual and quantum mechanics. And I thought, I couldn't have made that up if I tried.
That's exactly right. I
Mhm.
love that. I just got the goosies.
You know what's so funny? That's a very spiritual thing because I remember being at a spiritualist um, event and somebody said the exact same thing, that into their brain came this wave particle theory. What is
Really?
seriously? And so that is so funny because and this was a woman, she was older, this was not in her line of any, and she's still, I mean, the last time she was wave particle, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it.
Right. I need to
Um,
look it up again because obviously it's happening in conversations across the veil.
yeah.
Something big with wave particle theory that my father would just love and he would want me to know
Yes,
about.
I'd be so
Yeah.
tickled by.
Yeah.
Wow. And there is something, though, convincing in that sense of I know I couldn't have made that up because I don't know that thing,
Mhm.
that it arrived to you in that way. How
Mhm,
beautiful.
and so clearly, like, it woke me up,
Yes.
Mhm.
right? It wasn't a dream, but it was like, "Wave particle theory? Where's my phone?" You know?
Yes.
Right,
I love
right.
that.
Yeah.
So time goes by so very quickly. We still do have a little bit of time, but prior to pushing record, when you're asking what are some of the things that
Mm,
we might be exploring together, and I had asked about here we are, very auspiciously in January of 2025. And because we're really both of you have your connections with your guide/guides, there's reason for people to feel nervous and weighed down by the energy
yes.
or to be just very imminently curious. Are you receiving any messages about this particular time in human history?
Yes. Bernadette, do you want to go first?
No, I'm gonna let you, Bev. You go right. You go ahead. This is yours.
Yes, there have been. And because my focus is so personal on each individual's personal, who are you? What have you come to do? How is your life? I don't often ask about, big picture until recent events when I was like, what the heck? And Spirit said that when there's several things, but one is when there seems to be as if the collective or something bigger than us is on a different stream to us, it would be comforting to say, isn't it lovely that I live in a world of love and everywhere I look, I see what I want to create? That would be lovely.
Yes.
And they can be very disquieting to look around and think, oh, I think I see something different than that.
Yeah.
But the guide said the homework is exactly the same, no matter what. The homework is to become who you came to be
Mm.
and to bring the qualities of your unique self to life, no matter what. And whatever is happening in the big picture, there is the weight of it. But if we made the misunderstanding of going like, oh, I have to wait for things to get lighter so I can be myself, we miss the point. We came here to lift it. We came here to be ourselves and to resonate with others. So there is a much more clear sense of collective
Mhm.
that we're moving from the me to the we
Mhm.
and to connect with others of like mind. But it doesn't even really matter if, like, does this person support the team that wear the yellow
Right.
shirt or the green? It's like, what do I value? How do I live my values? And how do I help others to do the same?
Mhm.
That's so, so good.
Yeah, it is right in my spirit. My guide is very much, it's working. It is the work that we are doing. for in this lifetime that that we came in to do. And it's funny because we come in each lifetime with a different list of things that we were planning. And sometimes we're on one team and sometimes we're on the other.
Right.
And that is, you earlier you were talking about apartheid and being there, and thinking about just how does this work? Like, why are there people on one side and the other? And we are in the role for whatever it is we're supposed to be doing in this lifetime, and somebody else may have chosen the role
Right.
of the bad guy, so to speak, or the or to be on the other. Just a quick, I remember seeing somebody walking down the street who was very disabled, and I kept thinking, why do I look like I do and they look like they do, and really having a hard time with it. And my guide said to me, basically, in this go around, you are a teacher. And as a teacher, it is easier to listen when, the way you are teaching, I need you to look this way. And the way they are teaching, we need that.
That's God, I just
Love
got
that.
chills.
Yeah. So it is. So what you said is absolutely beautiful, and is exactly what I think
Mm,
Spirit is sharing with us.
mm,
And for
just
me, I love that so much, Bernadette. And for me, it's becoming a call to remember and to lead with a boundary and reconnect with compassion,
Mhm.
yes,
right?
yes,
Just very pedestrian examples. The guy that does my hair, he has just the opposite viewpoints that I do. And I was thinking, my learning is to connect with him,
yes,
Mhm.
not to prove anything. It's not to argue with him, right? It's just to spend this time with him
yes,
and to see what happens and just to simply notice and be kind. Speak up if I feel I need to. But I really actually didn't feel I need to because the conversation just went back to more of commonality. And like you and I have discussed, Bernadette, this idea of contrast.
mm,
Mhm.
What you were saying, Bev, if everything was wonderful and light, it would be so wonderful to be love and light. But the
Mhm.
assignment is the same, be love and light. I was cut off the other day in traffic by someone who their car was, a symbolic offering to all the political leaders that I don't believe in. And it was like, this could no. What if
right,
this is a nudge?
Mhm.
right,
That person is seeking that person because of something they've gone through, something
yes,
they signed up for. What if I got out of my own way and found
yes,
love for them? And I'm saying this as if it's easy to do,
Yeah. It's.
right? It's not always easy to do, but like Peter Alessandro said when we asked him about life lessons, he kept saying it's remembering who you are.
Mhm.
And when
mm,
we forget, not if, but when we forget and we, flip someone the bird or, the rage comes or whatever part of ourself is ignited, that do you show yourself compassion so that you
mm,
can
Mhm.
and I
right,
just love remembering that because there's more than ample opportunity to practice it.
indeed, yeah, over and over daily. And, if we look at each of us and then we look up and up, there's a point at which we really are all connected, we're not separate.
Right.
So, we just have to go high enough up to that point at which we are connected.
Yes, we have to go high enough up.
Yeah,
So
it's the ascension. It is
Yes,
and we are doing it, in each lifetime. We're doing it.
that's
and
right,
yet it is no accident that we have landed in these lives with
right.
darkness, with illness, with
Mhm.
heaviness.
Oh,
These data points of emotionality or physical disease, they
right,
are not without purpose.
that's
Mhm.
right.
Well, if heaven is all light, and in order, here on in the 3D world, it is light and dark, because we can make the progress that we can make in having that contrast. And so,
Yes.
you know,
And the soul can go deep, when we think of that vertical line with our spirit at the top of lightness, that the depth is the soul. And so our capacity to go deep assists our capacity to go high.
mhm,
Mm.
So we're working on that vertical, Whereas we can tend to, in our world, think if it's good or bad, happy or sad. It's like, well, actually, all of living, it's on this trajectory, and depth is depth.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be capable of going there, be capable of holding that which is heavy, even while we maintain our lightness of being.
Yeah.
I love that because I think in our community, in the community, meaning people who are drawn to spirituality, can be too bypass.
Yes, it can
But
be
then
a
you miss
little
the
bit
lesson.
phenomena, right? And we
Yeah.
miss the weight of it. To be able to sit with the weight of the world and to resonate with the lightness of our being. That is the trick. It's a Cirque du Soleil maneuver.
I love that. That's what it feels like. Like, I don't think I'm that flexible.
Upside down. Yeah. Holding on by a thread.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. That's so good. Well, this has been amazing, and I'm sure we could talk to you endlessly. But
Yeah.
how do people learn more about you? What are you up to? How do they work with you?
Very, very simply. So I do readings via Zoom now all over the world, which is really fun. I leave my bedroom in my slippers and I say to my husband, I am going to Malta, or I'm heading to wherever it takes me. So this way on Zoom. I do coaching as well, which is oftentimes a little bit more navigating the nuts and the bolts with that spirit guided focus. And so my website, bevmartin.com, is just the easiest place to find me.
Mhm.
Wonderful. And I am remiss in saying this every single episode, but for those of you who are listening, we'd love your participation, your thoughts, your questions, your experience. Please let us know. Like, share, comment. It really enriches the experience for everyone. So thank you. And thank you so much, Bev.
My
Yeah.
pleasure. And thank you both for creating this container and for bringing your presence to it. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Beth.
It's our honor.
How I Made It Through is produced and distributed by EIQ Media, LLC. Elevate your emotional IQ with podcasts and content focused on overcoming adversity, leadership, mental health, entrepreneurship, spiritually transformative experiences, and more.